Hey there, everyone. This is Chris. This is going to be an overview of Season 1, Episodes 1 through 3 of The Magicians. For those of you who are new to the channel, I take shows and movies based on books and compare them and contrast them to the source material. Not to prove one or the other is better, but so that I can fill you in on plot points and background info that might be left out for various reasons, good or bad. Oh, and, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of my future videos. And, click that notification icon to join the notification squad, as they say, and be the first to know of any new videos. Warning, there may be spoilers ahead, since I discuss what happens in the TV show and compare it to the book, and sometimes that reveals things down the road or changes in the show that might actually spoil things for you in the future. So if you don't want to see that, now's the time to stop the video. I'm going to go quickly through each episode and highlight some key moments and characters that are different in the show than the books. Like I said at the outset, in this video, we'll cover episodes 1 through 3. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get down to business. Okay, episode 1. First up, we have meetings in the park. Yeah, this wasn't in the books at all, and actually goes against one of the main conceits in the novels, namely that there is no chosen one. Not really. They all have their parts to play, and only through working together are they able to make any positive movements. Recasting the story as a hero's journey is, well-trodden ground, and usually fine, but one of the things that made these books stand apart was the fact that it wasn't the standard fare in this regard, so not a fan. Next up, we have mental health. So, one of the threads that can be seen in the novels is not only Quentin's struggle with depression, but really all of the main characters. At one point, Eliot even suggests that, at least in the beginning, having a fractured psyche, being someone who's tormented and full of pain, is necessary for the working of magic. With that being said, having Quentin in a mental institution was created for the show. Unlike the previous change, though, I rather like this one. TV is a medium, as well as film, of show, don't tell. And with only 13 episodes in a season, the writers don't have the luxury of slow playing the introduction of Quentin's emotional issues. Having this moment easily establishes that he is dealing with very real issues and has been for a while. At least in the mundane world, they're very real issues, and makes his reaction to the magical world he is about to enter all the more impactful. So, well done, writer-type people. Well done. Another change, and possibly the biggest one, is everyone's age. All of the main characters, from the members of the Scooby Gang, Eliot, Margo / Janet, Alice, Julia, and Quentin, to the Chatwin children, have been aged up quite a bit. In the novels, Quentin, Alice, and Julia are all around 17 when the story begins, and they test at Brakebills. The Chatwin children are all between the ages of 5 and 10 when their stories begin in the novel. I think it makes a certain amount of sense to age up the magician characters, making Brakebills a graduate school as opposed to a college, since the themes are way more adult than is sometimes comfortable when they are being played out by a 17-year-old. It will also help as the story unfolds, since eventually the magician characters are all in their 30s in the novels, if they stick with the established timelines. And it's easier to make that believable when you start with 20-somethings as opposed to 17-year-olds. Next up, we have Enter Brakebills. This is a pretty massive change from the novels. The trip to the alumni representative was Quentin and James, who is their childhood friend who Julia is in a relationship with. Julia wasn't involved. I actually like it better that she was there, since it gave us a clear picture of the dynamic between Quentin and Julia, which was sorely lacking in the novels. While that is nice and all, what it really allowed us to see is how Julia is brought to Brakebills for the entrance exam. In the novel, Quentin sees her there, but they never meet. It isn't even confirmed really until much later that she was there as well, and what happened. It's interesting how they handle Julia not getting into Brakebills in the show as opposed to the novels. In the novels, she basically blows the exam by getting too caught up in everything, thinking too much about the circumstances as opposed to focusing on the test. You know, the strange wonderfulness of it all, and as such isn't able to focus on what is actually happening. Contrast this to the show, where her admission or lack thereof is a planned change to an established timeline by Jane, and you get two very different contexts and resolutions. In the show, she is a victim of circumstances outside of her control. In the novels, she is the architect, unwittingly or not, of her own fall. Oh, and chatting with Jane about the Beast after Quentin did his bit of magic, completely made up for the show. Next we have Time to Shine. This was an interesting moment for me, Quentin's first magic class. In the novels, he is called on first to demonstrate magic, and given he doesn't know any real magic yet, grabs the glass ball and does sleight of hand magic to great effect and the basic love of his peers. Then the professor asks Alice up and she lays down some serious stuff. It was meant to show how little Quentin knew and how far behind his peers he really was. But in our new Quentin is the chosen one view of the magicians, this moment really doesn't play as well. What it still did in this version of the story was to illustrate Alice's apartness. Not only is she demure, withdrawn, and introverted, but she is demonstrably more powerful and knowledgeable than her peers, which is another way, of alienating someone. Next up, we have Julia's invitation. God, I really hate this. They have basically removed all agency from her character, which sucks. They have made her into the consummate victim, and for no reason. In the novels, she enters the magical underground scene by sheer force of will, a goodly amount of rage, and brilliance. To take that all away and yet again make her a victim, this time of an attempted sexual assault, is just crap. Julia's arc in the novels is one of my favorites, precisely because of her determination and motivation. Did she make terrible decisions and abuse herself mentally and physically? Yes. But she was the architect of it, for better or worse, not just the victim of it. It's just frustrating. And finally, we have a little night reading. The end of the episode was not found in the novels. Alice did not come to Brakebills to investigate what happened to her brother to begin with, at least not as a primary goal. She was there because she was a magician, born from magicians, and just wanted to go to school and learn. What's interesting to me is that Alice in the novels had very little personal motivation and agency. She kind of just went along with the flow of things, which always felt odd to me. With that said, I don't mind her having this newfound reason for her presence at Brakebills. Giving her a mission, a purpose, outside of what is expected of her is great. The seance, though, that's a bit weird. Again, this is another instance of Jane messing with Quentin, which has no parallel in the books. That's not to say that Jane doesn't mess with Quentin and the rest of the Scooby Gang. She does, just not in this overt way. In the novels, the entry into the world of Brakebills that the Beast exploits is caused by Quentin screwing around with the professor who is in the middle of demonstrating a spell. And it happens after he has been there for a while, not, after his first day. One of the things that writers adapting novels to the screen, whether small or large, have to contend with is what should they leave in, what should they leave out, and what should they compress from a time perspective. The Magicians books are especially tricky with this, since the first novel covers 4 to 5 years, and they don't even make it to Fillory in that book. Not for any real sense. I think the writers have done a pretty admirable job of walking this tightrope, especially with season 1. Okay, and the last entry for episode 1 is The Beast Attacks. This is mostly played out as it was in the novels, with a few important exceptions. Firstly, only one person dies or is injured while the Beast is there, a student who apparently throws off whatever spell is keeping them all still and tries to attack the Beast. For her trouble, she is literally eaten alive. Secondly, when he arrives, the Beast basically seals the room magically, making it impossible for anyone to get in, including Dean Fogg. Given this fact, all the action with the Beast taking his eyes and screwing his hands up, etc., is entirely added for the show. And lastly, there is the end where the Beast recognizes Quentin. As I mentioned earlier, in the novels, Quentin isn't really that special, anointed, chosen hero guy. So there isn't any reason for the Beast to know about him, where he is, or even his name. Okay, that's it for episode 1, so let's quickly move on to episode 2. The Beast continued. Quentin teleporting the watch to his hand and it breaking the paralysis spell was all new for the show as well. In the novels, Quentin's specialty is eventually discovered to be minor mendings, meaning he is good at putting things back together, small things, which upon inspection isn't really a good skill for your hero to have. In all the bits with the students fighting the Beast, that was just not happening. It's not even a question of punching below his weight class. They don't even know the sport he plays. He is as near to a god as one can get without actually being one, at least in the source material. Next up, we have the Hedge Witches. This whole sequence wasn't in the novels either, and fundamentally changes the character of the Hedge Witches. Their saved houses, all of it, and not really for the better in my opinion. The underground in the novels existed as a place of refuge and support for those who were deemed unworthy of the various magical schools around the world, of which Brakebills is just one. There were tests and rituals that had to be administered and adhered to, but nothing like we see in the show. It makes them seem like a criminal underground, which really rubs me the wrong way. And the thing with the zombie was just kind of absurd, so I could have done without that. Next we have Magicians and Technology. In the novels, magic and tech don't mix. Anything more advanced than, say, an old rotary telephone or a mechanical watch would basically go haywire when a magician was near and doing magic. So they didn't exactly have computer labs and cell phones at Brakebills. This always struck me as odd, given that magicians, once leaving Brakebills, had to live in the real world surrounded by technology. They basically just ignored this plot point from the novels, which was interesting to me. Okay, next up we have Penny. Penny is 1000% different between the books and the show. For starters, he is a pasty white guy who dresses like a 90s punk, mohawk included. He isn't really a member of the gang the same way he is in the show either. Everyone pretty much dislikes him because he's kind of an ass. While Penny in the show is a bit of an ass, you get the idea that it's for a very good reason, not just because he's a jerk at his core. While both versions are teleporters or travelers, Penny in the novels didn't have anyone in his head talking to him the whole time. The Beast certainly wasn't teaching him anything. All of this adds up to TV Penny being vastly superior to novel Penny in every conceivable way. So, super big fan. Penny's one of my favorite characters in the show. Quentin getting kicked out of Brakebills. I think you might be seeing a pattern forming here. This plot point was added for the show as well, from the call to Julia to the fight with Penny. Not that they don't fight in the novels, but it's later on and for different reasons. All of this was added for some sort of dramatic effect, although I'm not sure why. And Eliza never came to him and chatted him up about Destiny, the Beast, and put him on probation. This is all material to support the classic structure of the hero's journey, which was very much absent from the novels given Quentin wasn't really the hero. Although he did heroic things, as did the rest of the main characters. Okay, that is it for episode 2. There was a ton more in episode 1 because it's all world building and setting the stage. So now we're going to talk about episode 3. First up, we have Becoming a Physical Kid. This was a bit of a change from the novel, in that there was a raging party with lots of people in attendance. The disciplines at Brakebills were very cliquey in the books, and being a member of a physical discipline was rare, so you really didn't get more than a handful in a given year. When Quentin and Alice joined the group, there are only 3 other members: Janet, who is Margo in the show, Eliot, and Josh, who is not even in the first season of the show at all. So that was weird. They weren't really raging party people like they are in the show. Next up, we have Penny the Psychic. While not new for the show, we didn't see much of Penny's psychic abilities in the novels, as he was always a fairly minor character. His discipline in the books is traveling, as opposed to the TV show, where his discipline is psychic, with traveling being his specific branch of the psychic family. This doesn't really bother me too much, as it allows for some interesting plot movements in later episodes. It makes for some pretty great interactions with Quentin. And also in the novels, we don't really see Penny using his ability as a traveler or interdimensional transporter, I think as they call it. During his time at Brakebills, we were only clued into it later when Penny is telling the physical kids about his trip to the Netherlands, which we'll talk about later. Next up, we have a visit to the Hedge Witches. This was actually a nice addition to the show. Quentin and friends don't find out about Julia and her new area of study until the end of the first book. This was nice because it shows a great many things, from the disdain heaped on the Hedge Witches by kids from Brakebills, to the fight between Julia and Quentin airing a lot of the feelings they both have kept locked inside. One of the big changes with the underlying story here is that Quentin did tell Fogg about Julia in the novels, and I think they just couldn't find her, and that's why they didn't wipe her memory again. But he did do what he said he was going to do in the novels, and so yeah, that was a pretty massive change there. And finally, let's talk about rescuing Charlie. Yeah. So this was funny. Again, this is a new storyline for the show, but one interesting thing was that they did pull a plot point from later books to do it. The make a Niffin into a person again thing is actually from the books, specifically the last book. It wasn't used for Charlie, and it wasn't normal magic either. It was arcane magic from another time and place that took years to unravel, decipher, and master. So it was a little odd that they brought it in so early into the show, and it was just a spell that Alice found in a book. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they're going to pepper more of these things from different time periods in the books into these seasons. I know by the end of this season, they're going to do it at least two or three more times with like the knife that kills a god and stuff. So we'll talk about that when we get to those episodes. But it's just interesting how they're pulling and pushing different plot points that are separated by decades sometimes into the seasons of the show. So yeah, that's it. I know this was longer than my normal videos, but it was actually pretty quick given covering 3 episodes in one video. If you have any questions or you would like me to talk about anything from The Magicians other than episode reviews, please let me know in the comments or hit me up on Twitter at Chris J. Davis. I really like to do deep dive videos, which are going into specific parts of the mythos and history and backstory of a novel or TV show. So if you have anything you want to know about Fillory or the Chatwins or Ember and Umber or any of that stuff, just let me know and I will add it to the list and get to it. Thanks for your time. Remember, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want. You can do a kinetic spell and hit the like button if you liked what I was doing. If you don't like it, hit the thumbs down button so I know if I'm doing a good job or not. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.